Happy days. Oh, almost at double digits. These people are bang on time. I make it 25 seconds to 12 still. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're going to have like the awkward 2 to 3 minutes of chit chat prior to actually starting, just to let people filter in. But 20 people already. If you do the honor of going to the chat, you'll need to click from host and panelists, just make sure it's on everyone. And then if you could just introduce yourself, name, where you're from, and what you're looking to learn from this webinar, that would be amazing. I'm Simon from GivePanel, and I'm joined today by Laura and Kate from DMS, who are completely going to be running the show today. I am not an expert in this at all, but very, very excited to learn about law supporters and how to create them. So we'll be kicking off in probably about 90 seconds. We're up to 30 in the chat, and still no one has put anything in there. So if you just introduce yourself, name, where you're from, and what you're looking to learn today, that would be fantastic. Laura, Kate, you're broadly close to me, aren't you? I'm in Bath, and you're Cheltenham, Bristol.
Yeah, the agency is based in Cheltenham, so yeah, we're in the area. Laura's probably our furthest employee actually, and representing the Bristol massive. So yeah, absolutely. So yes, not too far away.
So there's a funny hub of fundraising in the southwest, isn't there? There's a real legacy down here. So yeah, there is. All the long-term fundraising agencies seem to be down here.
A bit of a mecca for a lot of people that didn't want to go to London to be in agencies and ended up in the southwest.
Hi Tamsin, hi Reese. This could be a wild card, but I think Help for Heroes are based southwest as well, talking about the southwest. Hi Dean, thanks very much for coming along and commenting. Cool. I make that 2 minutes past. We're at 50 people. Hi Helen. I'm excited to have someone from Ireland in the chat. That's exciting. Oh, Norway. Is Norway our furthest location today? Anyone can beat Norway? Hi Trude, lovely to see you again. Hi Marco, hi Beth. Cool, I think we should get going. So I'll kick it off just with a very, very quick introduction. Laura, Kate and myself met about a month ago, I think, for the first time in person, which was at a brilliant event run by a team at Let's Run Social down in Leamington and Spa. Leamington Spa. I saw your presentation for the first time there. I think it was sort of a shortened version of what you're going to present. And we at GivePanel have been helping supporters connect with charities by sort of focusing on audiences rather than sort of the fundraising platform end of that. And one of the big problems that I always speak to our customers about is we've sort of obtained 10,000, 10 million records over the last 6 months, 12 months, whatever that may be. And actually, we're not sure what the next best step is. How do we encourage these supporters to take sort of that journey with us? And then I heard your presentation and was like, this is sort of a perfect opportunity. So this isn't our area of specialism at all. This definitely is your area of specialism. So I'll chuck it over to you and look forward to the next 40 minutes. Just some housekeeping. If you have got Q&A, there's a few interactive moments during the chat where you can just stick it into the regular chat. But otherwise, if you could use the Q&A function, we'll take questions at the end. So thanks very much for coming, and I'll hand it over to you, Laura and Kate.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, really excited to be able to replay this. As Simon said, you know, the session that we did in person with the Let's Run Social team. But yeah, we're going to be talking about those pots of supporters that you have generated and sort of actually what you can then do with them afterwards, sort of really build a strong long-term relationship with them. I think Laura's going to be chief clicker through on the slides, but yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we all know that acquisition is incredibly important, that we all work so hard to be able to find supporters, people who've fundraised and committed to fundraising, you know, doing often, you know, events on your behalf, and that's a fantastic level of you know, a fantastic value that they give to you. But actually then what do you and what can you do with them to elicit a longer term return relationship, because that acquisition is so expensive. We need to make sure that you're really getting the value from that. Everything that we focus on in our work as a specialist response agency is to really think about how we can build that long-term relationship with a supporter, turning them into a donor, and ultimately moving them through this flow to aim to generate a legacy, you know, the ultimate pledge within the world of charity fundraising. But obviously we understand that that relationship isn't linear. It looks superb on this visual that people will naturally move through those steps, but it's not a simple relationship. It stops and starts, it changes shape and changes pattern during the duration of that relationship. And so it's something that we have to work so hard at, to sort of build that supporter relationship through engaging, interesting communications, creative interpretations, and just thinking about how we can really deliver the value of our purpose, of the charity's purpose, to these supporters, to these donors, to make sure that they really realise how important they are to us, and that then we can build that longer term relationship with them, and through the communications, and obviously stewarding them, communicating with them, asking them and telling them, and building a two-way dialogue with them is absolutely vital to that. And today we're just going to take you through our thoughts and insights on sort of the best ways to do that.
Yeah. And of course, this is all about storytelling. Fundraising is all about sharing the stories of your beneficiaries with your fundraisers and supporters. And when you're thinking about a lifetime of giving, it's kind of like, how do I tell that story and keep it interesting for a whole lifetime, literally a whole lifetime? So what we're going to show you today, we'll show you a framework for how to always approach your storytelling with your supporters and donors. But we're also going to give you some practical tips on the very first step to take, which in our opinion, and also chronologically and logically from the donor's point of view, is to give them a really, really good welcome to the organisation. So how many of you at the moment have a welcome journey in place? If you pop your answers in the chat, isn't it, Simon? The more we'll see like sort of how sort of equipped you are already to be able to take this first step with your new fundraising recruits. The reason, other than it just being chronologically the first thing to do, the reason we're focusing on welcome journeys is also just because it's so vitally important. So what you're looking at here is some response rates from a very typical campaign that we run for a household charity, for a national brand charity. And if I put these clusters behind it, then what you can see is that you get amazing response rates from people who've donated within the past 12 months. But as soon as it goes beyond 12 months since someone donated, and you're into this 13 to 24 months and 25 to 36 months, then the response rates just drop so much. So not only is it much more cost effective to retain a donor than it is to acquire one, it's also much more cost effective to keep someone active from the very beginning, rather than taking them through a constant cycle of them lapsing and then reactivating them and so on and so forth. So if you can keep someone ideally within the 0 to 12 month bracket where they've donated really recently to you, then you'll have a really sort of efficient and very high ROI fundraising program.
It looks like we've got good response for that. I'm just seeing yeses in the chat. Maybe it's because it's quite tough to say no or ish, but have we got any no's? Have we got any ishes? Or everyone seems to have a good welcome journey in place already. So that's good start.
Good. Okay, well then maybe we can turn this into a seminar and we can share what we're doing well at the moment. But hopefully still the framework that we can sort of share with you from our supporter research and insight will maybe give you perspective to reflect on what your welcome journey is doing at the moment. So one of the core things about sort of about keeping supporters on board for a long time is that they generally feel satisfied with how you're treating them. Now, I like to aim for far higher than satisfaction. I mean, if someone's just satisfied, that's not really a glowing sort of endorsement, is it? Oh yes, I'm satisfied. I want them to be delighted and to love what you're doing. But if we just deconstruct that basic component to begin with, then satisfaction comes from your expectations meeting your experience, or even your experience exceeding your expectations. And in order for us to understand that and then therefore be able to construct a welcome journey that exceeds and meets their expectations, we need to understand really how your supporters are experiencing your welcome journey, and then also what their expectations are. So first, in terms of their experience, human experience tends to be sort of clustered into 3 key areas. And this is the work of a brilliant psychologist called Kano. So we've borrowed a lot of his stuff here. This isn't proprietary DMS insight. This is established psychology. But we have hygiene factors, which are often known as the brilliant basics. So these are almost your minimum requirements. So if you're not doing these things well, then actually you don't really have much of a chance of having a long-term relationship with these donors, because you just aren't hitting the key mandatory requirements that will keep them satisfied, or make them satisfied in the first place. So I'm going to use the analogy of a meal throughout this part of the presentation. So if you're thinking about the hygiene factors of a meal, it would be literally that you have a table and chairs to sit at, that you have cutlery and a plate, you know, assuming it's culturally cutlery and plate kind of food, but that you have like the kind of infrastructure just to allow you to eat your meal in the first place. Then we move on to performance factors. So these are the criteria by which we generally judge the quality of an experience. So this is kind of like the sliding scale, where if you do really well, then someone will judge your experience really favorably and say it was great. If you do poorly and don't meet their expectations, then they'll say it was a bad experience. So it's kind of this linear scale where you can either excel or you can do the basics and kind of not really show the best that you can possibly do. So of course, in the restaurant story, it's the quality of the meal. It's the, you know, how delicious was the food? Did you enjoy it? Was it what you expected from the menu? All of those things. There's expectation management, and then there's also the actual inherent quality of it. And then we move on to excitement factors. So this is often called surprise and delight. And as a sector, we love to talk about surprise and delight. I think because it feels good for us to deliver surprise and delight. You know, we love the feeling of going above and beyond for someone. And yet quite often we don't necessarily remember that we have to get the brilliant basics right and the performance factors right before someone can truly appreciate the surprise and delight. So really, if these factors aren't present, no one's going to be dissatisfied with you because they're not expecting them in the first place. They just don't exist in this expectation triangle. Whereas if you do deliver it, if you do add something on top, then it's genuinely a lovely surprise, and it's something that's going to make them feel sort of a little bit special. So so in our analogy, we have the sort of little touches like a happy birthday or something like that, or a free drink or something like that, but just something that takes it above what you're expecting. So if we think about the donor experience and how those sort of 3 levels of supporter experience translate into our world, we did some surveying. We've done quite a lot of surveying, actually. Some surveying is probably underplaying it a little bit. We spoke to about 70,000 donors over the last sort of 8 years or so, and that's 70,000 responses. And one of the key things that we asked them is actually, what do they want from us? Where are their expectations set? Which things are most important to them, and which actually are possibly things that fall into that, either that surprise and delight space that we like doing, but that aren't really essential to the donor, or that are actually in the hygiene factors, and we can sometimes forget how important they are. But that for the donor, they're the sort of the foundation of everything that they see you doing. So what I'd like you to do is have a look at these. I'll read them out in a second. And then just in the chat function again, just say which letter corresponds to the factor that you think is most important. So of all these 10 options of the supporter experience, which is most important to how the charities treat you as a supporter? So first one, A, offering some choice in the communications I receive. B is thanking me appropriately. C, recognising the contribution that I've made in the past. D, using an appropriate style or tone in your communications. E, demonstrating that the charity cares about my needs. F, giving me opportunities to support the charity in other areas. G, informing me how my money is spent. H, making it clear why my continued support is needed. I, not asking for support too often, something that we quite often think is a milestone of the supporter experience. And then J, finally, offering me opportunities to say I don't wish to receive certain communications. So I'll give you a moment to tap that into the chat and decide which one, just pick one above all the others that you think is the most important.
Gosh, this has been incredibly hard. Do you remember fastest finger first from who wants to order them? What
We've
is
got
this?
B's and G's, a couple of
So
E's.
thanking me appropriately and informing me how my money is spent. so
Very
far.
hard to pick C and D from somebody as well.
So that's recognition of contribution and appropriate style. So that sort of show me that you know me.
Very. We had a lot of B's to kick off with.
Yeah.
And now we've
A lot of
got a
B's.
couple of G's.
Yeah.
To be fair, there's a good range of letters coming through. It just shows that it's actually quite difficult to pick which of these factors supporters think is most vital in the relationship with an organisation, with a charitable organisation.
And it can also be very subjective depending on where you're at with the charity that you're thinking of when you're answering this question as well. Because if they're meeting your basic needs already, then some of the things you might not even think are an important factor. Whereas if a charity is failing in one of them, then it automatically might become more important to you as well. So is that, have we got everyone?
Yeah, I think
yeah,
carry on.
we think. So how's it coming out? Are we looking at lots of G's and B's still?
I would say,
of fun.
Go on. I would say B has just picked it.
B, thanking. That
Maybe
is
just, yeah.
almost always what we find when we run this session, whether it's in person or virtually like this. Thanking is obviously a really important cornerstone of the supporter experience. And I'm absolutely sure that if you didn't thank people, or if you thanked them in a way that didn't seem genuinely grateful, that you would have some real hygiene factor issues. You know, you would have some real brilliant basics not being done. But actually, when we asked the general public, this is what they said, that actually thanking me appropriately was the least, had the lowest proportion of people saying that was very important. So we had a lot of people saying it was moderately important, but not many said it was the apex, it was the most important thing. What was the most important thing to them? So all of you that was writing G's, the most important thing is informing me how my money is spent. And I think that this is in itself a way of saying thank you, but you're saying thank you through the medium of telling them about their impact and recognizing that their gift meant some sacrifice to them, you know, that by giving the money to you or by fundraising the money and spending their time on your cause, that they've lost either their own money that they could have spent on themselves or their loved ones, or they've lost time that they could have spent with their loved ones. So I think that that's how we really interpret that big difference between thanking me appropriately and informing me how my money's spent. And I think it's a really key learning that for so many charities, because of structural issues within the charity, it can seem really quite difficult to find a sufficient level of insight to be able to say, you know, this is what our delivery teams are doing, and to have that really joined up sort of approach across the charity where you can genuinely tell them not necessarily how their exact pounds and pence have been spent, but give them a really, really good idea generally of what the money's being spent on. So if you needed a business case for having better impact reporting from your delivery teams, please use this. Please get in touch with us and we can send you this if you need to have this to show to your line manager or to anyone else who's perhaps blocking you from being able to do really good impact comms, because it really is the most important thing that donors tell us that they want to hear from us. So now we know what donors want from us, or supporters in general want from us. Now we can move on to the framework of how we present that as well, how we present all of these things. Because like I said, you know, that even though thanking doesn't rank highly in the very important category, it's still important that we do it in some way. So this was a big project that's kind of like our flagship insight piece at DMS, and we talk about it a lot because we're obsessed with donor loyalty. We don't want to ever recruit a donor who makes one gift and then leaves. You know, we want to recruit donors who do that whole arc and become legacy donors by the end of their life. So we started a project, and our first starting question, this was around about the time, probably just after the first credit crunch, when, you know, budgets were starting to become really hard to achieve. And so we were asking, theoretically, how can we raise more money from our base, from the same number of people, without becoming aggressive in our asking? So without asking them more frequently or without pushing up the prompt levels. And so what we needed to do was to increase the gift frequency. So of all the times that we asked them, how many times were they responding? So rather than responding to 1 in 10 appeals, we needed them to respond to 1 in 4 appeals, or just increase that metric slightly. So this was where we started our extensive surveying work. So with our key charities that we worked with, particularly at that time, about seven or 8 years ago, we probably sent out over 500,000 surveys, and we received 70,000 responses back. And we managed to identify these 6 factors that are absolutely essential to the supporter experience. So I've tried to group them to keep this all sort of nice and harmonized. I've tried to group them by the hygiene factors, the performance factors, and the surprise and delight. So you know that the very first things that set the foundation for your supporter experience are satisfaction. Like I said, it's important, but it's the very minimum requirement. And then trust. They need to trust you as an organization. So satisfaction in this context comes down to, you know, are you getting all the brilliant basics right? So are you using their correct name? Are you addressing them how they want to? Are you getting their address right? Are you thanking them for the right gift amounts and acknowledging all the different ways that they support the organisation? So they might have run a fundraiser, but are they also a donor already on the base, or have you had some other interaction with them? Then do they trust you? So, you know, building trust is a very multifaceted, complex thing, but the essential core of it is, are you doing what you say you're going to do? So are you acknowledging, are you following up? If you said that you'll report back, are you doing all of those things? And also it comes with respect as well, doesn't it? Are you treating them with respect and acknowledging that they have done this for you? Then we come into the performance factors. So the first one of these being clarity. So this is where does someone truly understand what you do as an organization? So they might understand your mission and what your big picture view of the world is, but do they genuinely understand how you are achieving that through your project work, through your day-to-day delivery? And then really importantly, do they believe that that work actually makes a difference? Sorry, I've got an incoming cat. This is the perils. I thought I'd locked him away, but he's got out somehow. I'm just going to get the drink. He's on standby. Does it really? This is so like, this is definitely live, isn't it? You can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, everybody.
It's also quite normal for one of our presentations, isn't it, Laura? One of your cats always mugs the screen.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Opie always takes center stage. Yeah, sorry about that. Right. So then it comes into difference, you know, so they understand what you're doing with your project work, but do they really believe that that's the best way to solve the problem? Is that project work making a difference? Is it solving the problem that they've fundraised and that they've donated to try and solve? And then when it gets into the surprise and delight factors, this is where we're talking about how you create that really astonishingly amazing supporter. So the one who does become an advocate, the one who does consider legacy giving to you guys. And so this is where someone believes that your cause is the most important thing that they can, or one of the most important things that they can invest their money in. So if they had a £20 note and they were asked, of all the causes in the world, which one would you give it to? They would choose you because they think that the issues that you're tackling, because they understand what you're doing and they believe it makes a difference. And so therefore they believe that the things that you're doing are the most important things that they could invest their donation in. And then finally, involvement. This really is the apex. So this is where they feel like they're actually part of the charity, and that more importantly, that being part of that charity says something positive about them and who they are. So this is something that organizations like Greenpeace and Amnesty do really, really well, because if you were to say, you know, I'm a Greenpeace supporter or I'm an Amnesty supporter, that instantly says a lot about your character and your values, and it tells people a lot about who you are. So if you could get yourself to a point where you actually have symbolic relevance in culture like they do, or just that your values resonate with a group of people, you know, and that they find them really attractive and that they want to be part of that mission and they want to be involved, then that's a really amazing place to get to. So I would say if you're looking to implement this, start with those trust, satisfaction, clarity, and difference. Make sure you're doing those well, and then move into those surprise and delight factors. So like that Kano model showed us, get your brilliant basics right, and then move into the surprise and delight. So one example where we've done this, obviously we use this constantly in our work, but we were given the opportunity to do the newsletter for Poppy Scotland. So it's traditionally owned by the marketing team. They were having some sort of resource issues. So we got the opportunity for the fundraising team and us as their partner to produce the newsletter. And we applied the commitment model to it. It was our first sort of, okay, let's assess what they're doing already against the commitment model. Is it delivering against those 6 areas? And by the time that we applied those 6 areas and just thought how we could sort of restructure, zhuzh things around a bit to make them hit those six points, we increased their income from £3,000 to £61,000 in one campaign. So this stuff really, really does work, exactly because it gives the donor what they're looking for and it makes sure that they have the experience that they're looking for. So that's the commitment model. Now we're going to move back into the welcome journeys. Now that you understand the things and the messaging and how you tell those stories, now we can go back to the welcome journeys and say, right, okay, so how might we put this into place? So we welcome supporters out of politeness, out of sort of starting a relationship with them. But also sometimes there are really practical reasons to do it. So for example, if you're in a space where you're recruiting regular giving supporters, then there's a real cost benefit for welcoming them, because it makes sure that all of their direct debit details are correct and stuff like that. And also I imagine that for some of your fundraisers, this is one of many fundraising drives that they might organize. So it's very much the start of the relationship, not just seeing it as a one sort of hit interaction. And it sets that tone for the supporter as well, that this is the beginning of something, not thanking them for something that's happened historically. So in a typical welcome journey, you don't want to make them too long. We normally look at somewhere between 6 weeks and 3 months, depending on how much money is being given and how likely they are to stop that relationship, either because of the type of product it is or because of the amount of money that's involved. But first of all, you just want to thank them and warmly welcome them. So hitting those brilliant basics. Then make sure you can see the commitment model coming out here. Then make sure they've got a clear understanding of the cause and of its impact, and then make them feel great about their donation's impact. So this is showing them that they're making the difference and that this is an important cause to support. And then from that point onwards, you can work on monetizing them and getting second gifts or second fundraisers, or just generally repeat interactions from them once you've established that really core knowledge of who we are, what we do, and why it's so important. So as an example, sort of how, I've been working with the commitment model for 5 years now, but I appreciate that when you first interact with it, it might seem a little bit abstract in some ways. So I wanted to give you some examples of how you might layer the commitment model messages into a welcome journey. So satisfaction, I mean, we talked about this actually. This is less about messaging, other than setting the clear expectations. It's about just making sure your database admin is really good though. This is where database admin, and if you're doing large mailings, where print production and fulfillment is really, really important. All of those sort of basic business functions have to be really, really good, or else you could fail at this first point. Then it's about those clear expectations, and from that very first communication that you make sure that they know who you are and that you're establishing what you're going to do, how you're going to treat them. Then the trust. So for example, show them that you'll treat them with respect and care. You can say it, but better if you show it. Demonstrate your good intentions and deliver on them, and allow them to have the control over what comms they receive. I mean, that I didn't draw attention to it, but that was the second and third most important elements on that chart of what people value. So that's really important, and that's a great way to demonstrate trust, because it shows that you're willing to give the relationship back over to the donor as well. Then clarity, so clearly communicate who they're going to help and how that help will be delivered. Specific, if it's been donated to a specific cause or been inspired by a specific case study, then focus on that person. Whereas if it's more general and they've just self-selectedly set up a fundraiser or come to you guys, then you would talk more widely about the charity. But either way, you do want to expand out into that wider space. And then in terms of the difference, this is where you really talk about your impact and successes. So talk about other projects that have finished, or where you've hit a milestone and you can already prove something, so that you're showing we've done this before, it's successful, and you're getting the beneficiary's voice of the beneficiary saying how it helped them, if they are a verbal beneficiary. Obviously, if it's an animal or something, more sort of campaign related, that won't work, but you can still talk around that. If you are in a course like that, you'll know how to articulate your impact. And then make sure that people feel that their donation made a difference. And this is something that's so easy to overlook. But what we hear time and time again from people, and you all have heard this, I'm sure, no matter what your cause is that people's reason for not continuing to donate or to fundraise is because they feel that the money's just gone into a big pot and it's not really noticed. So if you can pepper in messages that make people feel that their donation and their interaction has genuinely been noticed, then that really helps. That shows that not only do you make a difference, but that they've made a difference as well. Then moving into our sort of apex zones. So in terms of demonstrating your importance, really take time to discuss the issues that are underpinning your cause. Why does your cause exist? You know, what structural issues are there in society or in you know, any of our systemic kind of thinking? We've moved into a space over the last few years where people are thinking about systemic issues, institutional racism, things like that. People who are engaging with us are understanding that there are root causes to a lot of these things. And so talk about those, because that explains why the issue isn't going away. And just really educate them on why it's so important, always with that in the back of the mind. I need to explain why this is more important than other causes. So not being competitive, but just being aware of the other causal areas that they may think are important. You know, so human rights often goes hand in hand with climate change, for example, as does international development. Whereas, you know, supporting children in need and animals in need often goes side by side. So think about the competitive sectors at the same time that you're talking about the importance of your own, so that you can kind of subtly talk around that. And then involvement. So this is giving them that active role, so that you do eventually get to that point where, you know, you're articulating your values as a charity, and therefore when someone supports you, it's portraying a set of values. And your donors and supporters can actually sort of benefit from that association with your organization, with your cause. And one of the fastest ways to do this is a bit of a hack. This is the only time I'll advise a hack, because this is stuff that you really should put effort and attention into thinking about and talking to your donors about. But a great hack is just to reflect back the language that your donors use. So chat to your supporter services team, chat to your community fundraising team if that isn't your role already, or just basically talk to anyone who speaks to supporters and fundraisers day to day, and find out what words they use to describe themselves. So we've just done a legacy project, and there was a ton of insight work, and it was giving us lots of different sort of things that they think are important. But we noticed in the language, the word that was used so often was hope. People were just talking about, I like this project because it gives me hope, you know, and that came up so much, even though it wasn't one of the original key insights. It was just so obvious that we had to talk to people about hope in terms of that long term. This is where the charity's going. This is what we want to do. We want to give you hope and give others hope. So reflect their language back at them, find out what language they're using, and then use that language in your comms. And they'll already feel they'll feel like they've got a kinship with you, that you're shared values, shared language, and shared experiences. So this to begin wrapping things up then. So you're looking to welcome and affirm, and at that point in time you're ticking off the satisfaction and trust parts of the model. Then you're talking about your work, and at that point you're ticking off the clarity part of the model. Then you're talking about your impact, and that's where you're discussing and proving that you make a difference and that you're important. And then when you get into the donor experience, that's a real sort of huge net that you can cast, but that should be the space where you can start to show that you care about them and that you consider this a two-way relationship, and also that you want to offer them something, that there is a sense of involvement, that this isn't just a broadcast relationship where you're just going to tell them what you want and what you need, and that they become almost like a cash point, or, you know, the equivalent of doing fundraisers that generates money for them, but that you really want to know their thoughts, their feelings, what they care about, what they think is important, and that this is a partnership, not just a one-way relationship. We've been thinking about some of the hurdles as well that people often stumble across when they are implementing these things from a practical point of view. And just to, particularly in the sort of how you've recruited your donors, the space that you guys are in, two things that we thought were probably quite important to just flag as a consideration. The first being channel mix. So quite often people have or organizations have an instinct to communicate with people either primarily or solely via the channel in which they were recruited. So of course, for you guys, that would mainly be social media, or you may extend that to digital and having a very online relationship with them. Now, our point of view when we say that, we would never tell someone what to do, but we just ask them to reflect and put themselves in the donor's shoes and ask which is more important to the donor. You know, do they remember and do they deeply care about which channel they first interacted with you via? Or have they given you lots of other contact details? Are they giving you signals in giving you those details that they're happy to be communicated with via all of those channels? So whilst there are so many benefits to digital communication, don't shy away from also having a physical presence on their doorstep as well. You know, send them the occasional letter, plan maybe a postcard as part of your welcome journey, just because that will have impact. And even if the messaging isn't interesting, it may even tip into that surprise and delight space because it's different, because it's out of the ordinary for how you would normally communicate with them. So try to keep a broad range, look at the consents that you're being given, look at the contact details that people are disclosing to you, and see what you can interpret that, how you can interpret that to create a journey that your donors and fundraisers are giving you indications that they want to hear from you via. And then finally, there's sometimes charities can, I say this with the greatest respect, having worked for charities for the first half of my career, like worked directly in-house for charities can sometimes get in the way. And the donor just really, they want to help the beneficiary, and they don't often really mind which charity it is that delivers that. They just want to find a charity that delivers it in the best possible way and in the way that benefits the beneficiary the most. So sometimes we need to just reflect on how much do we talk about ourselves and how much do we talk about the cause, because the transactional relationship is between the charity and the donor, but actually what the donor wants is a relationship between themselves and the beneficiary. That's how they're going to judge you and your success as the charity, is whether the beneficiary is happy and their life or their situation has improved, because that's ultimately why they are fundraising or donating to your cause. So hopefully that's been helpful and has struck the right balance between theory and practicality. So just to wrap up, and obviously we will be taking Q&As, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your feedback from this, but I'll hand back to Kate for a minute or two.
Sorry, I got distracted by the thumbs up, clappy hands and hearts that seem to be filling my screen, which is very kind of everybody. And obviously lots of information that's been covered in what we've said, but a couple of highlights before we go into a few questions. You know, as we flagged, you know, recruiting people is really hard work, but making them a loyal donor is really difficult, but more important than ever in these really challenging economic times. If we've had an opportunity to have a share of somebody's wallet, of part of their hearts actually, when they've committed to raising money for you or giving money to you, we want to make sure that we can build that long-term relationship that's going to be so valuable for everybody. And as you know, these new supporters come into your line of sight, they're really motivated and they're there wanting to be engaged by you, wanting to be impressed by you, and you know, they're kind of crying out for an opportunity to build that relationship, and so this is an ideal way to do that. And obviously it's entirely up to you. You know, you've got that opportunity to build a really committed supporter base. You know, that's what we do with our expertise as a direct response agency, a fundraising specialist agency, that you know, building compelling communications that resonate and deliver fantastic value for everybody. But we need to show that we're grateful, you know, communicate impact through those communications, and not just a thank you for the gift, but actually build this relationship, build a two-way relationship with them, and create some, you know, some really nice sort of pace and content within a variety of communications, as Laura said, not just digital necessarily, but also looking at offline as well, to create that pace, the variety, and of course ultimately some surprise and delight factors as well. or razzle dazzle, as it's also called. So I think we'll move into questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone would be clapping if they're on screen. You've got some very positive comments in the comments, and I think the heart emojis and the clap emojis said how good you are. So really, really appreciate you sharing all that. Before we get into the Q&A, can I just ask a quick question of the chat? From what you've heard today, what is sort of the biggest blocker in implementing like something like this? I mean, we're coming at from sort of the tech perspective. Is it data? Is it processes? Is it the know-how? Like, what is it blocking your sort of welcome journeys and your support journeys in general being this sort of A-star, 7-star journey that we've seen today? And then if you could stick that into the chat, that'd be processes and text, says Kian, and content creation, data accuracy from Lauren, processes, database and systems. Having access to the data, time, resource from Elizabeth. Our data isn't the cleanest. It can be hard to get all the data compiled into one place. Laura and Kate, just before we take Q&A, and there is a Q&A function if you want to stick extra Q&A in there now, you must face this problem a lot when you sort of start working with organizations. What is sort of the quickest, easiest, I know you said you don't like hacks, but what's sort of the MVP for saying our data is not in a good place, our process is not in a good place? How can you get started before you sort of implement the amazing theories and frameworks that you shared today?
I would say it normally comes down to a business case. You have to get those above you to care about this. So we have to get them to understand it's important. And if you show them a graph like the one that we had at the beginning of the presentation that shows how much benefit there is from keeping someone active versus letting them lapse, then it just helps them show that this isn't just about being soft and fluffy and saying thank you in 1,000 different ways. This is actually financially really sensible, and it's worth investing time in a little bit of data infrastructure to be able to get your data in place. You know, it can be something as simple, it depends on the complexity of your issues. For some organizations, it might just be doing a cleanse is helpful. For others, it might be that you feel you actually need to collect more data or improve your opt-ins and consents, in which case, you know, just ask people, you know, send out a letter. A letter is generally quite GDPR compliant. It's quite hard to go wrong. I'm saying this like it's not legal advice, but if you stick to mailing, there aren't many conditions in which you can fall foul of GDPR if you're mailing them, unless they've specifically opted out of DM, of course. But I would also say that technology is really improving. So I know just last week I met a company who solely exist to help small charities piece together their data and to create funnels to bring things together. So I won't promo them now, but these things exist, they're out there, they're being developed, and they're not being done and sold at huge high prices either. So it's about having the willingness and being able to take the time out of your fundraising role or your supporter engagement role to be able to look at those things, or to persuade, like I said, to persuade someone higher up that they should get a member of their team to do that for you.
And it doesn't always mean it's really scary that you have to suddenly cleanse your entire database, because there might be pockets of your database that are actually the ones that are used most often. You can do, we often run simple health checks with clients, so we can look at the quality without incurring all the cost of it. We can look at the quality of the data to sort of say, actually, what needs to be done to get it into a better state, a more usable state in terms of communications, communications opportunities. So that, that can be done. It doesn't mean suddenly you've got to rebuild your entire database. Sometimes a little bit of work can make a massive difference.
But I would also ask, I mean, we're talking here primarily, I know that you have many more donors within your pool, but, you know, we're talking about people who are fairly new to the cause, aren't we? Who are new supporters generally. And so look at what you're asking them for. Is Facebook putting up any barriers that prevent you getting the consents that you need? You know, or you just not, you know, where's this data problem coming from? Is it the flow of data from Facebook into your organization, which we hope not, considering, you know, where we're at today. But yeah, these are freshly recruited donors, so it's within your grasp to change it really quickly.
Gaz, I'm going to come back to your point there, because it actually corresponds to a question which is already in the Q&A around the impact of donations. But to Nadia's point there, new supporters are becoming more reluctant to sign up to receiving e-coms. Since GivePanel started, our entire sort of mantra was we want to get first-party data from social, so you can actually own that relationship with your supporters. Are you seeing, because I know some of that data was from 5, 6 years ago, are you seeing across the agency that actually people are becoming more reluctant to give those permissions? Is first party data harder to obtain?
I'm not sure if we are generally. I think it depends on the environment, on the ecosystem. So if someone is doing a lot of smaller Facebook donations or fundraisers, then I think what we have there is an issue of not bombardment of over access of they're receiving them from a lot of people, but probably each individual cause isn't sending many, but just because they're almost like the Dorothy donors of old that give a lot of gifts, a lot of small gifts to everyone, they're participating with a very wide range of causes, and so maybe that's causing fatigue that no one individual charity is responsible for, but just because they're generally very engaged in the sector, they may be creating fatigue there. That might be something that's more specific to the type of fundraisers that are recruited through the channels we're talking about today. Because of course it is so easy to just click to support a friend or to make a quick donation, isn't it? And then that can trigger these streams. But I would say generally, if someone is reluctant to receiving your e-coms, they possibly are supporting for very situational reasons and don't actually have as much capacity to become one of these brilliant donors. So I would almost be philosophical about it and just think, I'm just going to focus on the best. I don't have to convince everyone. We don't need the whole of the UK on our base. We just need to filter out the ones that already like us so that we can make them love us. I would just focus on your closest tribe, not on everyone. Really.
Oh, you've got such great sound bites. That's like the fourth or fifth time I've been scribbling on my iPad. We're seeing the same, like our data collection rate across the board since we started has remained pretty similar to when it was on day one. But what we have seen for sure is there is a transience of supporters on social that they might just be signing up for a one-time campaign or it's supporting a friend or whatever that may look like. And actually, you would argue that serving the opportunity when you can collect that data and say thank you and build that journey, the real standout difference is what happens next. So your best chance is kind of what you've been talking about today. I'm going to pop some of the questions in the chat. So Marco is asking, this is a very tricky question. How do you show that my donation has made a real difference and hasn't just gone into a big pot?
Oh, yes, big question. So there's two prongs to this. There's the show me you know me. So it's make sure you are using all of the financial history in your database to play back, what that donor has done for you. So if you're writing an impact report, then sort of acknowledge, thank you for the XYZ that you've donated to us or that you've raised for us this year, and talk around it. So that's the first part, is the recognizing what they've done, so that they're not receiving this as an anonymous person, but they're receiving it as a deliberate, acknowledged person. But then I think this is possibly the bigger problem and the more challenging part of this two-way equation, is getting that impact from your delivery teams. And I think personally, again, like, don't create huge challenges for yourself. So I would say just start with the case study. If you've used a case study, or if you have a case study who's very warm to your fundraising team, just start with them. Just communicate the impact of one person. If you can link it to the reason that they started to support you, and that's all the better. But just focus on one person, tell one person's story when you're demonstrating that impact. And hopefully that combination of things, that you're acknowledging a relatively, in the context of the organization, a relatively small amount, but you're also talking about a situation that was solved for a relatively small amount. I think the problem is when an organization starts talking about how many millions of pounds they've spent on things, that's where your donation feels insignificant. Whereas if you dial it back to impacts and amounts that are sort of equivalent to the scale of which your fundraising or your donations have been, then you avoid even creating that sensation that there is a huge, much bigger machine somewhere, and that this is all quite sort of small scale.
I think there's a balance on that as well, though, isn't there? That what we also have to remind supporters and donors of is that a lot of donors we've seen it over the years so many times, that they can feel like their relatively small donation can't make a difference because it's too small. And so a way that we've addressed that within active communications is by thinking about cohorts and the value that cohorts bring to the organization. So it could be events participants have raised this amount of money and that's helped the organization do this, or it could be that regular givers, people like you who give the same amount of money as you every single month, have collectively made a massive difference, because it's very easy for people to cancel a very small gift, not give or cancel a very small donation because they think it doesn't make a difference. But collectively, the impact, the amount of change that's possible by the combination of those seemingly small gifts is incredibly powerful. And sometimes reminding donors and supporters of that is a really powerful mechanic that you can play back quite easily within your communications. So there's sort of another side of it there as well.
Perfect. I'm conscious of the time. I just heard my alarm go off for 1 o'clock, and I know we said 20, 45 minutes. Laura, I think you just answered the question around number of surveys. Was that 250,070 responses, something along that line?
500,000, yeah.
500,000, 70,000 responses. And Will, thank you for saying the data from Give panel is fine. Since moving to PayPal processing, Facebook donations is proving harder. This is correct. I don't think you're missing a trick there. We've always been focused on that fundraising data. There's been absolutely no change with PayPal moving over there. And our belief is that actually your fundraisers on Facebook, to Laura's point earlier, is where you should be focusing those efforts, because those are people who sort of put their hand up and said, we want to support you, rather than necessarily their donors. I think that is it for today. I'm not sure if Alex, I know you're off camera at the moment. I know we have got another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know if you wanted to say a couple of words on that. Otherwise, we can just say thank you so much to Laura and Kate from DMS. We will be sending this recording round either later today or tomorrow. And Laura, Kate, you want to mention this last slide?
No, just if you have any questions or want to find out more about how you can either start a welcome journey from scratch, or you can sort of improve your current welcome journey, then we'd be really happy to have chats. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We've left you 7 minutes to get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee before that one. So really appreciate you all tuning in.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.